Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the old UptaCraft shop this morning. What we're going to do is get into video number 2 in our series about learning basic woodworking skills. Last time we talked about the first tool that every carpenter should have in his toolbox, and that was the simple carpenter's pencil. Today we're going to talk about a tool that goes hand in hand with that pencil, and that is your basic carpenter's tape. So stick with us as we go ahead and discuss not only the basics of the design of this tool, but also some of the tips and tricks that will be helpful in learning how to measure, mark, and lay out, taking another step forward in your journey to be a capable, skilled woodworker. Okay, so we have here your basic. The brand really doesn't matter. There are a number of quality tools out there. This one just happens to be made by Stanley, but again, this is not a sponsored video, so we're not promoting any one brand over another. Basic design of a simple tape measure, though, is a plastic case, or perhaps a partly metal, partly plastic case that contains a spring-loaded spool that contains this, what's called a ribbon, if you want to be technical about it, made of spring steel or some other type material. So again, it's a spring-loaded spool, so it will retract on its own. One thing you can do, though, to prevent it or hold it in position is when you pull it out a bit, and this thumb-operated lever here, the sliding lever, will lock the tape in the open position. This makes it much more usable for when you only have one hand free to hold it or to hook onto something, or once it's done, to just sit it on the work surface and have the tape be out and usable. So that's a nice little feature. Now, sometimes the question will arise, why is the end of this tape loose like that? Is that an issue of quality? Did the manufacturer get this wrong? Was this built on a Friday? Well, no, actually not, because if you'll take a close look, you'll see that the amount that this moves is approximately equal to the thickness of this hook. And that is actually a feature that's designed into the tape to allow for, well, if you hook onto something and pull it, it will be at one end of the slop and will allow you to take an outside measurement by simply hooking onto the material and taking the measurement. Okay? So, what's the reason for this slop? Well, imagine that you're measuring and taking what's called an inside measurement. In other words, you're having to push the tape up against something instead of hooking onto it. Well, the act of pushing against something, as opposed to hooking on, if that hook didn't move, it would create a slight discrepancy where something might measure 9 inches on an inside dimension, it would measure slightly differently if it was an outside dimension. So this is actually a design feature that allows you to take inside dimensions and outside dimensions and have the end result be an accurate measure. So it's actually something that can build your confidence instead of taking away your confidence in the tape measure. Let's take a look at the tape itself. Let's see some features that are on the ribbon. So if you'll notice, this is an imperial tape measure. In other words, it's measured in inches and fractions of an inch. And this is where the statement was made last week that math is part of carpentry. It is part of woodworking because you have to know your basic fractions. Let's take, for instance, the marks between the 6-inch mark and the 7-inch mark. You'll notice that each one of these graduated marks are at a different height. The gradually shortening lengths of the lines indicate the fractions of an inch. So in other words, if you look halfway through the dimension here from 6 to 7, the tallest hash mark in the middle is the 1/2 inch mark. So if you were to take a measurement and make a mark right there, the dimension would be 6 1/2 or 6 1/2 inches. Now halfway between the half, and the inch line is the next height set of lines. Those are 1/4 inch increments. So this here would be, let me use a pencil to make this more clear to you. That line right there would be 6 1/4. Now the 1/2 inch line would be 6 2/4. 2/4 equals a half. Over here, this would be the 6 3/4 dimension. And so you can extrapolate there that if these are the 1/4 marks, then halfway between them would be the 1/8 inch marks. Halfway between them would be the 1/16 inch marks. So if you're not really good at math, you could take the time to count off the 1/16 marks when laying out your dimensions, and you can come over here and say, this is 6 12/16. Well, if you reduce that fraction to its simplest form, 12/16 becomes 3/4 of an inch, 3/4. So knowing your fractions will help you in reading a tape measure. And if you don't know your fractions very well, a little bit of practice will also help you to become proficient at basic fractions. Let's move down the tape and see another feature. You'll notice that on this particular brand of tape measure, there is a black arrow on the 12-inch mark. Well, if you go down further, there is another black arrow at 24 inches. And you'll see the whole length of the tape, every 12 inches will be another mark. And what that tells you, 3F, that's 3 feet or 36 inches. So that's a nice layout feature when it comes to knowing your 1 foot increments. Which brings us to the red marks. You notice there's a red box around the 16. 16 inches later, there is another red box on the 32. And then on the 48. These 16-inch increments that are laid out using the red boxes, this is to make wall framing easier, or to find the studs in a wall, even when it comes to knowing how to hang a picture or a cabinet. Once you found the first stud in a wall, most modern framing will have the stud will be either every 16 inches or every 2 feet. That makes it clear why these layout marks make it so handy and is a nice added design feature on most modern Carpenter's tape measures. Let's go back and talk about the hook on the front end of the ribbon again, and talk about another feature. If you look closely, you'll see that the design of this, the end hook here, is such that you can actually hook on using the side of this hook, so that you can lay your tape beside a wall, taking that dimension. See if I can show you here. Allowing you to not have to unnecessarily twist your tape while trying to take a dimension. That twisting action could, over time, or actually over a distance, create minor inaccuracies in the dimensions you're taking. So the ability to lay your tape flat and not have it twist too much is definitely a contributor towards accuracy. And here's another feature. Why in the world would they cut a slot out of this hook on the end? Wouldn't that weaken it? Well, no. Give me just 1 second, and I'll show you the purpose behind that slot. So the slot in this tape is actually another nice design feature when it comes to accuracy of layout. Imagine that you are measuring a long distance, say in a large room and the wall is 16 feet long, and you've got to take a dimension across that wall. Well, one trick would be to use a nail or a screw. Once you've found a stud, in order to lay out all the rest of the studs on that wall, the trick is to take a fastener, a nail or a screw, and drive it in the center of that first stud. Well, by doing that, if you put the body of the screw centered on the stud, if you hooked onto the head itself, that would make you probably a good 1/8 of an inch or so off center. So this slot actually serves to hook onto the head of that fastener, making it so you, in essence, can pull accurately from within a 1/16 of the center of that screw. So all this does is allow you to use the head of a nail or the head of a screw to hook on and allow for the excess width of the head so that the tape can actually be measuring from the body of the screw or nail instead of the outside edge of the head of the screw. So that's another fine feature related to the design of most modern Carpenter's tape measures. Okay, so because you stuck around with me to the end of this video, I'm going to show you an extra tip and a trick. We're going to spend a lot more time on layout in the near future, but in the moment I want to show you a nice little neat trick of layout using a simple pencil, your first tool, and a Carpenter's tape, your second tool, to lay out a simple arc. So what I've done here is temporarily on my little router table, I have inserted a fastener, just a simple deck screw, as a means of creating a pivot point, the center of the circle that this arc will be part of. So using the tip I just mentioned about hooking your tape on the end of the fastener, which is firmly set into the wood, you can take your pencil, and let's just take the 16-inch dimension for instance. And now this is not the kind of arc that you're going to be drawing for exact layout purposes. This is an arc that is quite sufficient though for rough layout in order to rough out, say, pieces of material, prepping them to be sized and finished to a finished dimension, or perhaps making something that you can then set up with a router template to get your finished shape. So let's just start here, like I said, using, well, to stay on the camera, let's stick with a 15-inch dimension. Hooked onto my fastener over here. I'm just going to put my tape here on the outside edge, right here at 15 inches, and I'm going to keep my hand on the tape, and I'm just going to swing the tape and the pencil just like this. So as long as you keep your hand steady and keep your tip at that dimension on the tape, you can swing the tape and create what here is actually a nice, quite a good curve. And is it exact? Is it going to be the same as you could get by using a compass? Well, no, but it's certainly a good enough arc to rough out a piece of material, prepping it for your finished cutting. So this is one of many types of little tips and tricks, layout things that you can do using very simple tools, inexpensive tools. Stick with me next time as we take you to the next tool in your toolbox, and again show you another tip or trick that you can put in your mental toolbox. Okay, well, I hope you enjoyed today's video, and you can see how using just an inexpensive Carpenter's pencil and a simple Carpenter's metal tape, a retractable tape, readily in store and very inexpensive, you're beginning to see how these very inexpensive tools with some basic hand skills and the ability to do a little bit of math is going to take you down the road of designing and making some beautiful wood handcrafts. So I appreciate your attention, appreciate you sticking with me to the end of the video. Make sure you stick with me to the end of each video, because I'm going to do my best to give you a little tip and trick that will be a reward for sticking around to the end on every one of these videos in the woodworking series. So make sure you like and comment. I'd love to hear from you down below on what you think of my videos. I'd love to hear some suggestions on what you're looking for future content. If you have a specific tool you'd like to learn about or know more about, comment there as well, and we'll make sure to include that in the upcoming curriculum. Make sure, all right, you have a good day, and thanks for joining us on the UptaCraft Shop.